again. Welcome back. Hi, gang over there. I love it, making your way, except for Macy, who ran away. Thank you all for coming. I'm very excited to be once again welcoming the contributors and editor of the Healing Muse to Wells, where we're here to celebrate the launch of Volume 16, number 1, the fall 2016 issue of the Healing Muse. There's a long tradition of the Muse coming to Wells and us helping celebrate each issue. This is my 3rd year of joining the celebration, and it's wonderful in particular to see a bunch of familiar faces, people who have been coming in the past year or two, and to welcome Deirdre back as well. And so I'm going to just step away pretty immediately and let Deirdre take over the emceeing duties. I just wanted to say welcome to Wells, and we're honored that we can help you launch this issue. So Deirdre, I think you're going to kick it off.
I will. Thank you, Dan. Good evening, everybody. Let me just say on behalf of all the readers that Wells is, I think, our 2nd favorite place to read. I won't say the 1st favorite place because then I wait till I go to the next place and then I say we're very smart. No, but seriously, there are so many memories at Wells. For those of you who don't know anything about the journal, if you read the first part of it, every issue begins with a memorial poem to our founding editor, a very extraordinary woman named Bonnie St. Andrews, who died 13 years ago this month of a glioblastoma. A very ironic ending for a brilliant woman. And this journal was her baby, and I have been very privileged to try and carry it on in the way I think she would like. And what she wanted was, as a poet and a writer at a medical university, she oftentimes felt somewhat lonely. That medicine is obsessed with finding cures and sometimes forgets to care. And poetry can be just as harsh and unforgiving as medicine, but it also can be as caring and loving as the person you love best in the world. And so she wanted this journal to be a dialogue. She wanted it to be a place where people who work in a medical institution could write and listen, because she thought a lot of times that we don't listen in medicine. We tell you, the patient, what we're going to do for you. And she said we forget sometimes to ask the patient, what is it you would like? What is it you need? And in that moment, when a patient starts talking to a physician or a nurse practitioner or a therapist, a psychiatrist, whoever, in that moment begins real healing. And so as the years have gone by, I have been really touched and humbled by the wonderful work we are getting across the transom. And you are going to hear some of those people tonight. And I'm very appreciative to Dan, who has carried on the tradition that Bruce Bennett started with Bonnie all those years ago. Why is Wells so important? You're a small college, and yet it's everything I love about education and teaching and students. Every time I come here, I have such nice conversations at the table. You're always welcoming. It's very different from med school, which sometimes they walk around and they're very, we're so busy, we're so important, we're so busy. And they're just as loving as you people are, but you gotta really hammer at them. But you guys are the beginning, you're writers. I mean, I'm assuming that I'm talking to some writers here. So I want to wish you well on your careers, and as I always do, tell you to write to us, send us your work, mention in your cover letter that you're a Wells person, because that gets special consideration from our readers. We really do care a lot about Wells students, and we've launched many of you to your first publications, and Tori's here to talk about that too. So What I did was to print up a list of the people who responded that said they were going to come and read today. I'm going to leave it up here. I'm going to announce the first person, and then he will announce the second person, and so on. As you come up, tell the audience anything you want to about the poem or poems that you're reading, something about yourselves, and thank you for coming, and let's get started. Eric, would you be first, please?
Thank you, Deirdre, and you're spot on about the med school. That's exactly what it's like. If you'll indulge me for a minute, before I read my own work, a couple weeks ago I bought a book on Amazon called The Dance of Life. Not The Dance of Life by Havelock Ellis, but The Dance of Life by Patricia Piety. And some good stuff in here. And I'd like to read you one of her poems. It's called Love Hostage. You are the mirror in which I catch my fleeting image, audience for my best plays, auditor of all my accounts, oral historian, my magician, repeatedly producing me out of your hat, bloodlessly sawing me in half, then miraculously making me whole again. And this is my own work. This, not everything I write is autobiographical, but this is. This really happened just as I described it just about a year ago. It's called On Reading Poetry in a Car Service Waiting Room. I knew it might be a long wait, so I brought copies of Blood and Thunder and the Healing Muse to read. I study them. The technician comes in and tells me that I need brake pads, an air filter, a cabin filter, a shock absorber, a tire rotation, and an oil change. Gladly I say, go ahead, do it, whatever it takes. A week ago, I was sitting in another waiting room, reading Wordsworth and John Clare, the waiting room of the ICU where my brother-in-law lay dying. We did not say, even sadly, go ahead, do it, whatever it takes. We let him go. However complicated, it is relatively easy to put a car back together, to make it perfect again, humming along, running like new. How difficult to repair a person. We let him go. Even the most smoothly running car is not as valuable, as important, as lovable, as the most miserable, broken, moribund human life. And now I'd like to welcome Bruce Bennett.
I have a lot of things to say. I won't say very many of them, but it's great too. I'm not officially welcome in the Healing Muse, but people in the audience may not know that Deirdre mentioned Bonnie St. Andrews, and when I was the old Dan, I got a message in the mail, a envelope with a chapbook in it, called the Healing Muse, from a woman I'd never heard of, who asked if she might read at Wells, and we get a lot, Dan does too, a lot of requests for readings at Wells. We can't have that many. I did start to read it, and I read it, and I thought, wow, who is this person? I invited Bonnie. She came, I think, 2 or 3 times to read, and then as Deirdre mentioned, she became ill. Meantime, she had started the magazine. I believe the Healing Muse is read at Wells every year, occasionally twice a year. Sometimes we brought them back in the spring. And I used to use Healing Muse as a text in both poetry writing and creative nonfiction classes. And I number the people here tonight, many of them as close friends, and I look forward to the new issue. I had a book arts board meeting on the day of the launch in October, and I wasn't able, earlier October, I wasn't able to come and collect my issue. So I'm looking at it for the first time. It's beautiful as always, and I'm very excited to hear people read tonight. So I will also be reading for a couple of other people. There's a little hum in the microphone. Is it bothering anybody? Okay. So I have 3 poems in the Healing Muse. I'm going to actually read the first one last. But there's 2 poems that were not written. It's called 2 Sad Souls. and they were not written as one poem, but when I was getting my submission together in April, thinking what I wanted to send, I saw both of these and I recognized that they were quite similar to each other formally. They have somewhat the same subject matter, and they play off each other, and so I did put them together. And I would want to say about them, they're both in a triolet form, some of you may know. It's an 8-line stanza with certain lines repeated, with 2 rhymes. Well, that makes a pretty short poem, but I've been writing a number of linked triolets, which means you go on and write a second, sometimes a third or a fourth stanza. So these are both linked triolets. They're both about people who have passed away. And the first one, called a single room, was about a poet friend of mine who a number of years ago suddenly, for no reason I could determine, indicated pretty clearly she would never want to see me anymore. That's too bad, and I was hurt. I went to her memorial service in New York City. She was quite well known, I think a couple of years ago. And it turned out that she did this with everybody she knew, not only her friends, but her family. I didn't know this, and so she had a very sad end. I don't know why, but this is called A Single Room. She shut door after door until she occupied a single room. She barricaded with her will. She shut door after door until she was alone at last, and still and silent, tomb within a tomb. She shut door after door until she occupied that single room and cultivated death, a bloom that seemed to warm her with its chill. She occupied that single room and cultivated death, a bloom that filled her space with its perfume till there was no more space to fill. She cultivated death, a bloom that seemed to warm her with its chill. There, within that single room, she dwelt till there was nothing more. She dwelt in silence with that bloom, shut tight within that single room, with only death and death's perfume, without a window or a door. Yes, there, within that deathly room, she dwelt till there was nothing more. These are all cheerful. And the second one is a somewhat parallel case. Somebody I knew who knew fairly well in life, died a few years ago, a really disappointed and kind of bitter person. And when he passed away, you know, we were sorry, but we also kept thinking about the life that he didn't lead and perhaps could have. I love James Joyce's Dubliners, and there's a story in there called A Painful Case. And I think both of these are about people who, for one reason or another, remain mysterious and were sad and beyond our reach. So this is called In Lieu of a Eulogy. A disappointed man, a bitter fate. What could have saved you? Nothing that we know. We wonder sadly as you lie in state, a disappointed man, a bitter fate. Your rescue never came. That train was late that might have whisked you off. But would you go? A disappointed man, a bitter fate. What could have saved you? Nothing that we know. What could have saved you? Did you have a plan? And was it thwarted? Was it never there? Did you start out a disappointed man? What could have saved you? Did you have a plan? Did you once think, I'll do the best I can? You're silent now, with nothing to declare. What could have saved you? Did you have a plan? None of us knows if it was ever there. You are so distant, lying here in state, and yes, of course, we mourn you, as we must, and mourn as well how sorrow comes too late. You are so distant, lying here in state, a disappointed man, a bitter fate. We say the words, truly in God we trust, but where's the comfort, lying here in state? There's no reprieve, we mourn you as we must. There's no reprieve, we mourn you as we must. can't say this is happier, but it's shorter. And it's not Linktree lays. Writers are always trying to fix their work, but sometimes, you know, you write something and you put it away and you kind of think, I may never look at this again. So this is called Final Drafts. I'm very grateful to Deirdre for putting this first. It's ironic that this is the first poem in the Healing Muse. I make a tiny change, then stow away what now may not be seen until a day when I'm no longer here. I care in spite of knowing I won't care that it be right.
I'm Mary Carpenter.
It's always a pleasure to be here, and thank you. I mean, by way of explanation, I have one small poem in the Muse, and for those of you, maybe students too, I wrote this after having had a difficult morning, and I was sitting in my car with right at the driver's seat, and I took out a pencil and I had some paper, and I started writing on my knees. Anybody ever do that? And I made myself not lift the pencil. I just went wherever my hand and mind was taking me. And with very little change, this is the poem that came out, and it's written like this, with just very short lines. Here, near window door, opening to street life, the world waiting for mercy, today, tomorrow, not too far out of sight to imagine its sweet setting down here. So that's what you can do if you're sitting at a steering wheel. You need to spend some time. These are, this is a new poem, and I'll just read one of them, so I'm sure we have time. It's called Waiting. Sitting here mid-morning, the house is still, except for appliances powering up and down, slow drip, drip of a leaky valve, occasional creaks from walls settling, the slow slide of my knitting needles. Behind the closed door, she sleeps until noon, while targeted rays delivered yesterday wage a fierce battle against her unarmored self, where toxicity may still reside. I will set the table soon, seasonal plates on bordered mats, a tempting menu to stir her appetite, Simon and Garfunkel transforming the silence, all to signal normal for now. Thank you. Tom Daly.
I have two poems in the issue, and have some common themes. So the first one is called Listen. This is a poem, as I thought about it, partly about propriety and its problems. Holderline tells us that nothing is more difficult than propriety. It's called Listen. Friends in happy unions tell me of their pleasures, travels, dining, the theater, TV shows, quiet evenings, the sensual comforts of intimacy, household chores, who they are in the great world. I listen. Soon after you, slowly going blind and other ailments too, still working and cheerful, aided by your wife, I say, I want to show you this on YouTube. Let's go to the ball game. That picture, isn't it beautiful? What you cannot see, you listen. The second is called After Aceh. You may remember that Aceh is a city in the northernmost part of Sumatra where there was a terrible earthquake and subsequent tidal wave. And I've seen pictures of this wave that were taken. It's truly horrifying. Well, this is called After Aceh. Her death for him, a tsunami in Aceh. He knew the wave was coming. No one could stop it. He sought the company of one who'd seen it all before. He did not drown as the wave arrived. When the wave receded, exhausted by its inland journey, his illusions ceased. He was the prisoner of what was lost. Retreating waters carried him to uncharted seas until he found a land where he could belong. In that place, he met new life. Great-grandsons had arrived. Amidst the rubble, he held them. He was in ecstasy, a state his loss could not reach or alter. Their touch, their heft, their warmth, their life, asleep on him, their willing reception of his embrace, set him free. Next is Tori Russell.
Hi, so I'm one of the few probably not reading a poem. Mine is a fictional piece. So yeah, it's called Parental Lessons, Never Talk to Strangers. Layla was an obedient child. She always ate her veggies, even the broccoli. She went to bed when her mother told her to. She never ran with scissors. She had good grades and didn't watch too much TV. All the little sayings we learn and often disregard as children were the rules that Layla didn't know how to break. When she was 12, her father died. She remembers it vividly. The calling hours were long and boring. The room was gray, the outfits were black and gray, the walls were supposed to be white but were basically gray. The only bit of color that stood out was the rose on her father's coat. She had reached out to touch it, but her mother swatted her hand away. She saw many people she had never met before, had never even heard her parents talk about. She sat quietly in her chair and didn't talk to any of them. After her father died, her mother was different. She didn't talk as much. She started hiding herself away in her room more and more. She was moodier. Layla would come home from school, walking herself from the bus stop because her mother forgot to come get her again, and sit down to begin her homework. You have to finish your homework before you can watch TV, her mother's voice rang in her mind. She would be hungry, but wouldn't make herself a snack. Dinner before dessert, her father's voice admonished her. She would finish her homework and wait. Hours later, her mother would come down and begin dinner. Layla would try to tell her about her day, how she got an A on the history quiz she had been studying for, how this boy kept picking on her, how her English teacher was definitely out to get her. Oh, and can Kara come over for a sleepover this weekend? Her mother would make no response besides grunts or an occasional, Her eyes were fixed on the stove as she stirred the boiling water. Eventually, Layla stopped speaking, and her mother didn't even appear to notice. Years passed as her mother sat between worlds, and Layla grew up, got a boyfriend, started staying out late, going to parties. Now when her parents' voices echoed in her ears, she would ignore them. Most of their rules no longer applied anyway. She was no longer a child. She drank, she smoked, she ran with scissors. No one cared. It was Layla's senior year of high school when her mother pulled herself through the torn fabric between life and death. Her mother would be sitting at the table when Layla came home from school. She would chatter as she made dinner, ask about Layla's day. Layla didn't respond. There was one rule, only one rule her parents had taught her that Layla had stuck firmly to all these years later. Don't talk to strangers. All right, so the next one is Joyce McAllister.
Don't recognize myself. I have 2 poems in the current Healing Muse. The one is called Night Poem, which I'm going to attempt to read if I can get this notebook right side up. And then the second is a sonnet. And I've asked Bruce Bennett if he'll be kind enough to read that. Because I have a sight problem and I have an especially difficult time with sonnets.
A lot of people.
Well, I love to write them, but I can't read them anymore. Night poem. I wonder where they were, those words I can't remember, formed in darkness, an hour before dawn. No flowing pen, length of lead, small blank sheet of paper reached my hand to save them, nail them to the page. Instead, the sound was muted, echoed under pillows, teasing under sheets, begging half-closed lids to read their ticker tape ticker tape of words racing past dozing lids. But slumber stole each message, sent them back to paper, a hand that held a pen. It might have been a good poem, those words that searched me out, tried to chase me all the way back to troubled sleep. Bruce, let's hear
Joyce's sonnet is called Mother Seeds. While peeling apples, you remove the core, the segment of the fruit which houses seeds, an inner life unsparked, unknown before. Then you remember her voice, the needs, related while red peelings filled the pan held on her aproned lap, words wrapped in past adventures, childhood tales, some other man she knew before her marriage lot was cast. You learned to peel the apples too from her and took her stories to the core of you. Both seated knee to knee, you sought to spur the telling, hoard the words, small seeds that grew. She did not know her stories would seek light within the words her daughter yearned to write. Gloria Heffernan. She did.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. This is called Hiking Cocoa. Cocoa Head soars 1,000 feet over the glittering waves of Hanama Bay. Vertical climb, too much for the aging tourist who doesn't know any better. Temperature, a blistering 100 degrees. Empty water bottle, drier than the dusty bed of the crater below. The collapse is slow, graceful almost, as I sink to the railroad ties that mark the ascent. And then it begins. Ohana, they call it. Family. The man who gives me his extra bottle of water, the young girl in fuchsia running shorts massaging my hand to keep the blood flowing, the college student who tucks his backpack under my head while he fans my face with his baseball cap. the German tourist, who hoists my feet over her shoulders to keep your blood circulating, she explains. I surrender to them all as they minister to the stranger lying prostrate on the trail. Thank you, I say, mahalo, a mumbled mantra uttered down a long corridor where I hear my own echo. They shush me as if I were a toddler struggling against nap time, but they need to know what I see, gazing up from my place on the ground, where I witness the tender gestures of anonymous angels saving the life of a woman whose name they will never know. Pam Freeman. I'll just repeat everybody else's thanks for having us here tonight. It's such a lovely place, and it's even nicer when you come in from a cold, dark, spooky, leaf-blown drive. This is just really such a nice place. Does everybody know, well, by everybody, I mean you kids, know who Betty Davis is? She was smoking hot in the 30s. It was last century. A movie actress. And then she was really cool again in the 60s and 70s. She was basically cool all along. There's a quote from her coming soon. This poem is a three-parter. It's called Triptych 65, 75, 85. I quote, "Old age ain't no place for sissies." Betty Davis. 65, old naked woman. An old naked woman sometimes shows up uninvited in my bathroom mirror. Late in the evening, when I've been reading over Merlot and potato chips, and now it's bedtime, brushing teeth, nightgown waits on the door hook, but there she is, looking vaguely like a relative, distant in time, hometown, kin ties, no one close certainly, yet she insists on skinny dipping in the tub, so I fill it with scented bubbles, and in we go. "Any wine left?" she says. I dutifully drip to the kitchen to pour a glass for her. Soon she's tipsy and gabbling on about men from the past and girls and moments, embarrassing to me, hilarious to her. She won't quit, and finally I give up and giggle too. And then we're off, yelling power ballads and party anthems, swapping lies and secrets. Then in the cooling bathwater, truth. I know one of these days she won't leave. She'll stick around like she owns the place and me with it, and I'll have to let her. 75, Old Wives' Tale. Why do we say Old Wives' Tale? Old wives are the bravest. Their husbands' hearts crash and burn, leaving them to pack up the closet, breathe the familiar smells goodbye, donate the golf clubs, live with half the toaster unscorched, half the bed smooth, leaving them to stare at the oil spot on the blank space in the garage, like a map tack on a glacier, which in turn is barely a hopscotch square on a sidewalk marbled like Sunday china, under a plaid whirling uniform skirt, compared to the borderland where their man has disappeared, leaving them to rudder through crosswinds of memory, leaving time congealed and tomorrow an unmarked glide path. It's our own dark unease, pointing away from its shame, to call every silly myth an old wives' tale. We can't bear to witness old wives' truth. 85, old heart fading. If I had a bike, I'd ride you on the bars, back to that not yet instant when God knocked the arrow of eternity, held her breath, let it fly, hit the switch to light the stars. If I had shining eyes, I'd be the mirror you deserve. But even with these milky drooping cataracts, you are a miracle I notice every day. I'd trace your contours, color every curve. If I were truly good, I'd earn a place to shout forever in the company of saints. Joke's on them, I'd sooner sail the skies with you, 2 pirate galaxies a-spin in spiraling uncharted space. Be my Valentine, be mine. This old heart's fading, like the one you made so long ago. Names in crayon side by side, pasted out of paper, lace, and twine. But it still rings as strong and true as all the love that you define. However much the time we have, however much our time. There's Emily Weston. I hope she's here. Oh, you must read what Emily Weston has in the Healing Muse. It's your assignment. Judith Trice. Judith Trice.
As you can hear, I'm a little hard of hearing, so I can guarantee you'll hear this poem as I make up for it with volume. This is a poem I wrote shortly after my parents died a couple of years ago. They both died in the same year, 2 months apart. And I did suddenly feel a cold wind in my face, but I was harking back, I think, to the 50s television shows when I entitled this, I Dream of Genealogy. And you have to see the poem, it's shaped like a ship. And it starts with the single word, I. I am standing there at the prow of a ship, peering into the fog, spray in my face, sails snapping, boards creaking, and fanned out behind me, my parents, my grands, my greats and great-greats in dutiful lines, bobbing and nodding. A shout from the stern asks, where are we going? And though someone else set the sails, I look down to find a wheel in my hands. Laura Glenn.
Hi, thank you everyone for having us here. I want to clarify a little bit about the first poem because when you see it on the page, it might be a little easier to understand. There's a section in italics, the first stanza, that's supposed to be somebody who I don't know who has written something that I'm reading. And the poem takes place in a cozy cafe in Montreal where people can open the drawers of the desk-like drawer to the table and read what other people have written and also contribute what they want to write. So I usually don't reveal this much, but it's a little bit of a complicated poem, so I thought it might help. Diamonds and ice. Stranger, someone I will never know has written. I love the sparkle in your eyes, your unseen smile, your radiant brain. I love that you were curious enough to open the drawer. That takes courage. I admire that you keep doing you. Shine on, you crazy diamond. Courage? I laugh, silently, because I'm alone. The old wooden cafe tables have drawers on both sides stuffed with scribbled on scraps of paper for clued-in clientele, where people leave notes for strangers to read as they wait for meals. I consider what to write to someone I too don't know. Maybe something about rising above the miasma of daily despond to find oneself dissipating into blueness. No matter how desolate things get, I could say, let life astound like a poem. Let astonishment usurp despair, a shimmering splash. Tiny glasses within my glass of water, hollow ice cubes clink. Who will read my words? A hand glides across the torn page and scribes, think hard about the next person you have plans to meet. It will help things go better, though not without surprises, not what I meant to write yet. I reopen the drawer, secrete the scrap into the leafy shuffle, resist the temptation to double dig up the right wisdom du jour. The clock's second hand twitches backward before each revolve. Time doesn't slow down. The water in my glass doesn't harden to diamonds. Ice gives way to colder water. I drink in my advice. Think deeply about you, or try to. Know you will be here soon. Then, not wanting to overthink, yet unsure if I thought enough, notebook open, I keep doing me. Okay, I was very happy that the second poem was accepted because I think of it as a little eccentric and I wasn't sure other people would relate to it, but I hope you do. Igloo. It's snowing, but the flakes aren't starry prisms, they're just the sky's dander and I sneeze. The array of tracks. Children's sneakers make up for in pattern what today's snowflakes lack. Marching towards school, I followed their footsteps till I reached the end of the block, the mouth of a rough igloo. No one's around. I hunker down, squeeze into the snuggery. For warmth, I curl, breathe. The chilly barnacles, a far cry from glimmering ice hotels I've dreamed of, their ice bars furnished with cube seats. What was I expecting? Cave paintings, answers to questions I never asked. Too soon, the igloo's stale as styrofoam and cold, so cold. With gloved hands, I fashioned a nesting snowbird, packed with crystal glints, shimmering. Inside the cold kiln, it's cramped, entombed. I'm an Arctic bird, trapped inside its broken eggshell. I fear breaking my meltable gift to an unknown child. Poking my head through the opening, it's difficult to exit, as if I'd grown. I break through, doing minimum damage to the doorway, or my pride, no one in sight. Sometimes it's difficult to exist, I find, as a strange bird. I walk home, lightly feathered with snow, for a moment, almost new. Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone, oh, I don't see Kathleen, but I think, from what I understand, Bruce Bennett is going to read the poems of Kathy Kramer, who, her father is having a health crisis and she's unable to be here.
I got an email from Kathy this morning, and coincidentally, I had been to a reading that she gave in Ithaca at the library, Conference County Library on Sunday. It was a wonderful reading, and she has a new book called Planting Wild Grapes. And there was one poem that particularly struck me, so I did ask permission to also read that. But she has two medium-length poems in Healing Muse. The first is called Driving Mom. Next to me in the passenger seat, she looks straight ahead, but sees only the old roads hidden in the folds of her mind. She tries to follow the conversation, but gets lost when it turns a corner. A red pickup rockets past, spewing a plume of noxious smoke. Whoa, I say, he's going like a bat out of hell. Where is that? She asks. I glance her way. How to explain the location of hell? I thought she'd lived there for years. But if she has to ask, perhaps I'm wrong. Dear Martha, actually, Kathy wrote something to me about both of these poems. Her mother, driving mom, my mother was blind from her 50s until she died in her early 90s. She lived the last 10 years of her life in a nursing home, and toward the end suffered from some mild dementia. When I could, I'd take her for a drive that she loved. Being out and about like a regular person was a treat for her. And the other poem is called Dear Martha, and I'll read what Kathy said first. Dear Martha was an actual letter I sent to my friend when she lost a whole summer to extreme pain from an unknown cause. The letter came from that helpless feeling of wanting desperately to ease a beloved friend's pain. Dear Martha, if pain were a cloak, I'd lift it from your shoulders and drape it over mine, at least for a time. At least long enough for you to take a breath, deep and slow, for you to sleep through the night and wake to light as clear and liquid as the glass of well water on your bedside table. If pain were a blindfold, I'd loose its binding, let it fall to the ground at your feet so you could see again all you love of summer, the vault of sky arching above you, bowl of raspberries resting on the table, honey like a spoonful of sunrise on fresh baked scones, love from your friend, Kay. And the last poem, I wanted to read this because it struck me so much when Kathy read it, and I asked her permission. She said she'd be happy to have me read it. It's called Subsistence 101. Oh, let me read this first. Subsistence 101. In the late 60s, when the Back to the Land movement was in full swing, my first husband and I bought a small farm in Maine. We grew most of our own food, and in addition to what game we could add to our food supply, we raised chickens and my favorite, pigs. Grace is a fool for cinnamon rolls. She waits drooling by the fence, the snuffle of her blunt snout audible long before I get to the barn. Sometimes she stands up, rests, her front trotters delicately on the rail, and smiles when I come through the door, bearing stale sweets from the thrift store. As she gobbles the rolls from the trough, I scratch her bristled back with a stick. She grunts with pleasure. The man who comes for her also has a stick. Grace chases him into a corner, so he hits her snout. Blood drips onto the clean straw. I look away. She comes back to me, wrapped in white paper, taped and neatly labeled. I place her one package at a time in the deep freeze. Kathy broke down while she was reading this poem, and everybody in the audience has got no one business. So sorry to end with that, but it is one of the most moving animal poems I think I've read recently. And with that, thank you. Deirdre, did you want to say something about when the Healing Muse reads?
So that concludes, there's nobody else here, right, that's in the book that I missed? Okay, good. The book is full of more wonderful things and a couple of funny things in there too. As you mentioned, Emily Weston's short story is very amusing. The book costs $10. We're open for submissions now until May 1st. And I have lots of information up here if you want to take it as you go. Please, before you leave tonight, talk to the writers and tell them what you think, because it's so hard to be a writer. You're just sort of writing on your knees in the car, and then it's like they just want to run around and hug all of you because you're listening to us. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ruben. I just wanted to say, just a couple of things that struck me as I was watching the readers and then watching my students listening to the readers. There's very little that gives me more pride than seeing how engaged and how vibrant the creative writing community is here at Wells, and to see my students taking notes, and to see some very familiar faces who obviously try to come to all the readings, and some new people who just showed up and are very excited and were engaged. It's just wonderful to see. And for the readers, you know, writing is hard and writing is lonely, and writing is also, it's an act of vulnerability. And I think more so the work that appears in the Muse than in many other places, can you really see that vulnerability? And so there's a particular kind of bravery in sharing your work, and it's such a nice sized crowd too. So I just wanted to thank you all again for coming, for sharing your work, for listening, and let's just give all the readers one more round of applause.